IndyCar's hottest prospect over the past couple of years has just made the move to Europe, but not for F1, for F2. And 2026 is the biggest make or break year for Colton Herta, not just for his chances for F1, but for his racing career as a whole. Let me explain. If you're unfamiliar with Colton Herta, he's an American racing driver who's been competing in IndyCar since 2018 and has been incredibly successful. 9 race wins, a second place in the championship in 2024, and the series' youngest ever race winner at just 18 years old. And throughout his career, he's had heavy rumors about F1 on numerous occasions. It all started in 2021 with Alfa Romeo, as the team was thought to be bought out by Andretti, but that never materialized, and the seat went to Zhou Guanyu, so it was a swing and a miss there. But that was only the start. In 2023, AlphaTauri was going to sign Herta, and this was certain, but the limiting factor was super license points. To put it simply, super license points are required to acquire the super license, which is pretty much the standard to make sure not just anyone can join F1. But the problem for Herta was that IndyCar had so little weight in gaining super license points that he couldn't get the mandatory 40 points. And despite Red Bull trying to pull as many strings as they could, they just couldn't get him in the team, and ended up settling with Nick DeVries instead. In hindsight, it really is ridiculous. A 9-time race winner in IndyCar, and a guy who finished second in the championship, and someone like Tuukka Toponen in F3 qualifies. That's not discrediting Toponen, it's just pointing out a flaw in the system that Herta doesn't have the necessary points. Now that leads us to today, where Cadillac has entered F1, and Herta is still short of super license points. And that is one of the main reasons that Herta's in F2, because the chances of acquiring 4 points is a lot easier in F2 when he's competing against junior drivers instead of one of the world's most competitive racing series, even though as of 2026, IndyCar's super license points actually have been increased. But after all, super license points are definitely not the only reason to move to F2, because leaving IndyCar behind is a pretty big step. The move to F2 is also a step to get used to the machinery and climate that Formula racing brings. Both F1 and F2 cars, for that matter, differ massively from IndyCar, and that's not something that you just get used to overnight. The main difference comes from tires, downforce, and power steering. With F1 and F2, there's a much larger emphasis on tire management, which will definitely take adapting to, and also downforce is much less in these cars, meaning you have to have a lot more precision in the corners, which comes with a pretty different driving style overall, and probably the biggest change, these cars do have power steering, meaning from a physical standpoint, it'll be a lot easier to get a hold of than IndyCar. But outside the car, the tracks are also a big point to look at. If you're going to bring up that IndyCar races on ovals, and that won't help here, can it, pal? Watch this other video first to properly understand IndyCar, because it does have a good amount of variance in road courses and street courses that can translate over, especially considering that that's where Herta thrived the most in the series, with his first win coming at the Circuit of the Americas, which F1 races at. There definitely will still be a big learning curve with certain tracks, but that's what this F2 year does. It provides an opportunity to learn. But unfortunately, that brings me to my next point, and that not many people are open to the fact that Colton Herta can have a learning year. When it comes to the idea of an American from IndyCar that has a good amount of hype, people aren't exactly open-minded to the fact that anything but a championship win is progress. The concept of Herta going to F2 is not about proving he belongs in F1, because, quite frankly, I believe he's already proven that, and the point is to learn and obtain the prerequisites for F1. But obviously, that's not what people are really open to. In other people's minds, if Herta does not dominate the championship, he's not good, and this creates an unhealthy expectation around the situation. Yes, he's going against younger, less experienced drivers, but that doesn't mean it'll be a walk in the park. And that's not me coping, it's reality. I still expect a top 3 finish, but the finishing position doesn't hold nearly as much weight as people think, especially considering some of the recent young drivers to have success in F1 kinda did it with lackluster F2 results. The emphasis in general will lie in having a high enough championship position for the super license points, with a P8 finisher above, and showing flashes of adjustment. So this is all to say that Colton Herta's entire career kinda does ride on this year, but I haven't exactly explained that well, so here we go. Colton Herta's kinda put himself in somewhat of a limbo, taking all of his chips and betting on himself. He's left IndyCar, where he was thriving, cementing himself as one of the best, and being one of the poster children of the series, to make a step to not go to F1, but for a chance to do so. It's an incredibly ballsy move, and if 2026 does not play out how he would want, the amount of possible futures are really diverse. The obvious first option is if it does go well, and he makes it to F1 with Cadillac in 2027. Herta's already contracted with the team as a test driver, and he has heavy ties, so it's no surprise that he will be in the car next year if he's given the chance, alongside whichever the current Cadillac drivers performs better. This would mean everything goes to plan and the decision to ditch Indy pays off. But if it doesn't play out, it's not all smooth sailing. Realistically, this outcome of not having enough points is definitely a long shot, and I don't see it happening, but I do have to account for all situations here. Back in IndyCar, Herta's seat is being kept warm, but not in the way that they're waiting for him to return, as Andretti went all out and grabbed Will Power. Meaning, if Herta did want to return to IndyCar, it's not exactly a plug-and-play situation. Now I'm sure if this was the case, Andretti would instantly make some moves at the expense of one of their drivers and get Herta back into one of their cars. But by the way that both Herta and Andretti have played 2026, they're definitely hedging their bets for that not to be the case. But one thing I will say is the F2 schedule has a conveniently placed gap that maybe we could see a good old Indy 500 entry, but that's probably me being a bit optimistic here. Also, if F1 is the end goal and 2026 doesn't award enough super license points, is a second F2 season on the cards? The scenario is pretty unlikely, as Cadillac can kind of manufacture some super license points with FP1 runnings, and it would also take some serious flubbing on Herta's end, so I really don't see it happening. But if it somehow does occur, there's no way that Herta would go for a round 2 in F2. It would probably be more FP1 running or some off-season series. I do also have to say, when it comes to this year, this not only has a lot of potential to prove Herta's talent, but also the legitimacy from IndyCar. I've spoken on it a good amount recently, but IndyCar is in my mind one of, if not the best racing series in the world in terms of entertainment. But it's been given a pretty bad rep by those who don't understand it or give it the credit it deserves. And Herta's result of how the next couple of years will go is kind of going to be a big moving factor in this argument. If he does extremely well, IndyCar will finally be recognized as a top series in the world, but if not, it'll be a weaponized story regardless of any context or how unreasonable the expectation is. Part of that has to do with the fact that Herta isn't exactly starting from a clean slate, because bad opinions have already formed because of Logan Sargeant, the most recent American to join F1 back in 2023. To be fair to Sargeant, he was put in a struggling Williams team and wasn't exactly in the best scenario to develop or succeed. But once again, people don't want to acknowledge that. And to the vast majority of new, casual fans of the sport, it creates a pretty bad image of the firepower that American motorsport has to offer. After all, these are two very different cases, with Sargeant coming through the traditional path to F1 with the FIA series of F2 and F3, whereas Herta has already competed at an extremely high level, and the reason he wasn't in F1 already was due to IndyCar being undervalued by the FIA's bureaucratic superlicense system. He was never held back because of a lack of talent, but rather a technicality. And that distinction is very important here because it's what makes the issue of ridiculous expectations so frustrating. If Herta does have a transitional F2 season, shows genuine pace, collects his super license points, and moves to Cadillac, a large portion of the internet will still treat it as a confirmation that IndyCar drivers cannot cut it in Europe, ignoring every single piece of context that makes the conclusion lazy and wrong. Nobody questioned European drivers who had quiet transitional seasons when moving between categories, but for an American coming from IndyCar, the bar is set at dominance or failure, and there's no in between. The definition of a strong year for Herta is not winning it all. It's not about dominating the series, it's about adapting, showing genuine progression, and most importantly, securing those super license points. That is the bar, and if anything, F1 is the real grounds to judge the talent for real. If it does all come together, like I hope it does, Cadillac will come calling in 2027 and finally put an end to this saga and write a moment that not only shows a driver making it to F1, but the end of an extremely long process of super license rejection and an undervaluation of experience that will make one of the most unconventional paths to F1 we've ever seen. The journey itself makes the payoff more rewarding, and this year's not just about winning for Colton Herta. It's about getting the shot he always deserved.